International travel is a bottomless bucket list of amazing adventure and endless opportunities. From the mountains and falls of South Africa to the gardens and cathedrals of Russia, traveling abroad is where the world truly becomes one's oyster. Yet, when the realities of traveling abroad goes left, understanding the laws of the land and fighting to be on the right and legal side of justice isn't always right, after all.
Many talented celebrities have all faced legal troubles due to traveling abroad.
Brittany Griner was taken into custody in Russia for having the cannabis oil in her luggage when she was entering the country to play basketball.
Freddie Gibbs found himself entangled in Austria's legal system, accused of a crime he vehemently denied.
He actually had to spend 4 months in a French jail before he was able to come back to the States.
And whether you're an actor, musician, model, athlete, or even an influencer when traveling abroad, being ignorant to the foreign fabric of simple law and order in those certain countries can quickly turn one's dream vacation into a nightmare destination.
Rapper A$AP Rocky's detainment in Sweden sparked international outrage. A simple street altercation escalated into a weeks-long imprisonment that gripped headlines worldwide.
In a foreign courtroom, you are not just fighting for justice. You are fighting against an entire country. You've got laws and rules that you might have never heard of before.
This is serious. Those clicks and views, they're not going to bring you home.
This is the story of how the glittering world of celebrity collides with the unforgiving nature of international law enforcement.
From the lap of luxury to a new labyrinth of legalities, being arrested abroad comes with consequences that even fame can't deflect. For many music artists, what starts as an exciting trip overseas can swiftly evolve into legal issues and possible arrest. In 2024, Nicki Minaj found herself detained in Amsterdam for drug possession during her world tour. And in 2019, A$AP Rocky's trip to Sweden turned into a nightmare, landing him behind bars. And in South Africa, Mos Def's controversial world passport documentation left him facing unexpected pitfalls abroad. For music artists in a foreign country, international soil proved to be a dangerous stage where one misstep can lead to legal nightmares. A reminder that while abroad, even a celebrity can find themselves powerless against the law.
Imagine a global superstar stepping off a plane in a foreign land, only for their journey to become a nightmare. Fame, once a shield, now makes them targets of complex legal systems.
What people don't realize is sometimes it takes thousands of dollars just to correct these mistakes, and that really comes out of the artist's pocket.
Mitigating the risk is a difficult thing after the fact.
In recent years, the world has seen a troubling rise in the unlawful arrests, detainments, and prosecutions of celebrities traveling abroad. Nicki Minaj found herself in hot water on foreign land more than once. In 2011, the rapstress was in Jamaica performing there for the first time. But Jamaica is known for its strong enforcement of anti-profanity laws at concerts. On her final night of Montego Bay's Reggae Summerfest, Jamaican police confronted her, informing her that she had violated the Towns and Communities Act and issued a summons. This act dates back to British colonial times.
Folks who travel overseas, they've got to understand where they're going. They've got to know everything there is to know about the local rules and customs.
When you're out the country, it's just this feeling of uncertainty because you really don't know the laws, you really don't know nothing about that country, and it gets a little scary.
Nicki never appeared in court for the charges, but had a guilty plea entered on her behalf by a local lawyer. She was ordered to pay a fine of 1,000 Jamaican dollars.
Everyone should understand the rules and policy of the country they're traveling to and move with caution.
And any hope that you have of international law somehow protecting you is really not something you should be relying on.
In another incident, in 2024, Nicki Minaj found herself entangled in legal trouble far from home. The rapstress, scheduled to perform in Amsterdam on her Pink Friday 2 world tour, was taken into custody on May 25th by Dutch authorities for drug possession.
What should have been a vibrant concert turned into a legal battle that threatened her freedom.
You just don't have the access to lawyers or to legal representation you may have at home.
People, especially entertainers, they should travel with your lawyer or to travel with somebody that knows the laws, because they're not the same.
Nicki shared updates with her fans through social media when she was detained at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. On Instagram, she went live during the encounter as airport officials informed her that she was under arrest and they'd need to search her belongings. Nicki Minaj quickly learned a hard lesson. Even a minor oversight with her entourage can turn into serious consequences abroad, leaving her guilty by association and casting a shadow over her tour. Nicki Minaj claimed that the pre-rolled marijuana authorities found belonged to her security. Authorities took Nicki to a jail cell she would sit in for hours.
In this era of global travel, from minor infractions to severe accusations, no star is immune.
Well, what we try to do now is any client who we know is planning on traveling abroad, we'll bring them in and make sure to go through all the do's and don'ts and all of the rules and regulations of whatever country they are going to or even traveling through.
Nicki repeatedly said that this was all planned to sabotage her tour. After she was released, she flew to Manchester for her performance, but wasn't able to make her commitment. Apologies to fans were sent from Nicki as well as the venue. Ambition and skill are requirements for success, but that talent doesn't take precedence over laws of the land, wherever that land may be. All too often, music artists find that the very fame that elevates them can also bring them unwanted attention, and sometimes the attention leads to danger abroad. On July 3rd, 2019, A$AP Rocky found himself behind bars in Sweden after a street altercation escalated into a violent encounter. It all went down outside of a Stockholm restaurant when A$AP Rocky and two members of his entourage were approached by two local men. One of the men, identified as Mustafa Jafari, accused someone in Rocky's crew of breaking his headphones and demanded a replacement. As the situation escalated, two women approached, claiming the local men grabbed them inappropriately earlier that day. At that point, the men followed Rocky and his crew and threw the headphones at them, causing a fight to ensue. What began as a verbal dispute quickly turned physical, with Rocky and his crew defending themselves against the aggressors. Rocky was arrested, accused of suspicion of assault. On the previous day, A$AP posted videos on Instagram that showed him being followed by two men. In the video, A$AP stated that he didn't want any trouble with the men trailing him.
So A$AP and his crew were supposedly minding their own business in Sweden when this man rolled up on them. The man says he was defending a woman's honor. A$AP says he did nothing wrong.
These guys was taunting him for blocks and blocks, and you can't do nothing. And the minute that you do something back, the law is looking at you.
The fact that he and several members of his group were charged with this, it makes me think sometimes just the celebrity's name is the one that's going to get the attention.
Although A$AP Rocky said it was in self-defense, he spent a month in prison in a Sweden jail cell.
A simple street altercation escalated into a weeks-long imprisonment that gripped headlines worldwide.
A$AP Rocky came to Sweden with the intention of performing, but just days after his arrival, his plans shifted from stage to cell. One of the men following him also ended up under investigation. The arrest caused a stir on social media, and public outcry began to grow.
Anytime you travel abroad, you have to move with caution. You also have to encourage your entourage to move with caution.
So when I thought about A$AP, I thought about his loved ones and how they felt not being able to get in touch with him.
Swedish police refused to let him meet with a member of the U.S. Embassy. Now, that's usually standard procedure when an American is arrested in Sweden. So they had to be hard on his loved ones to not know what was going on.
There's a lot of other Americans that can't communicate because the police don't talk the language that they talk. The embassy is there maybe once a month.
You just may not have the same legal access you will if you was at home.
After having a conversation with Kanye West about A$AP's incarceration, Donald Trump tweeted tweeted that he was in contact with the Prime Minister of Sweden to help secure Rocky's swift release. However, Sweden's former Prime Minister maintained that Rocky would receive the same treatment as any other defendant. Despite Trump's efforts, Rocky remained behind bars. After a month in detention, Rocky's case reached court. On August 14, 2019, he and his entourage were found guilty of aggravated assault, even though they acted in self-defense. Each of the 3 men was handed a suspended sentence as they stayed out of trouble for the next 2 years. The verdict sparked outrage and debate, particularly among Rocky's supporters who questioned the fairness of the trial and the impact of Trump's intervention. After the sentence, ASAP said the experience was difficult and humbling.
It's hard to say if the punishment fit the crime when it was self-defense. This was clearly a case of a situation gone wrong and ultimately the celebrity paying the price for it.
He stood trial, was found guilty, and was ordered to pay an undisclosed amount of damages.
Now, depending on who you ask, that may have been a little excessive, depending on what's your point of view. Was it self-defense, and why would he have to pay this man who approached him?
The things that you expect to happen don't happen, and you just gotta swallow it.
The now proud father of 2 sons with longtime girlfriend Rihanna has continued to perform his music and travel around the world.
A$AP Rocky's story made headlines worldwide. His celebrity status helped bring him home, but not everyone gets that kind of attention. For some, the fight to free their loved ones remains in the dark. Roger Bonds knows this all too well. A former bad boy bodyguard and the father of a rapper, Kevin Bonds, who has been locked up abroad for years.
You know, I felt for A$AP because he was locked up in a different country, but because of who he was, I seen all the attention that it brought. When my son had already been locked up for 5, 6, 7 years and didn't receive none of the attention. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in Paris with Diddy, and I got the phone call. His baby mother said, "Kevin's locked up." I said, "Kevin's in Africa." She said, "Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. He's locked up in Africa." And I'm bumping into a battle of explaining why my son is over there, when I feel like why he was over there has nothing to do with the case. The fact that he's being incarcerated and charged with something he had nothing to do with is the bigger picture. As a father, I just feel helpless. It's been 14 years, and my son is still locked up. Still locked up someplace I can't get to.
This is the harsh reality many families face when their loved ones are arrested abroad and lack the public outcry and media attention that global superstars receive. A reality that can turn a fight for freedom into a struggle against overlooked injustice. In the world of international travel, trouble abroad doesn't always emerge from violence. Sometimes it's the unseen complications of international laws that triggers the danger. This was the case for Mos Def, who became entangled in a passport controversy in South Africa.
For Mos Def, his 2016 arrest in South Africa shined a light on the world passport.
The rapper Mos Def was living in South Africa on and off since 2013. But in January 2016, he was arrested when he tried to travel from Cape Town to Ethiopia while using the world passport. He was also accused of allowing his family to stay even after their visas had expired in 2014.
Mos Def was arrested trying to travel from Cape Town to Ethiopia using the world passport, and it creates reams of problems because many places do not respect that document or treat it as anything more than a piece of paper.
People gotta realize that every country has a different law.
Prior to his arrest, Mos Def had entered the country 10 times using his U.S. passport. However, he chose to use his world passport due to his philosophy that the world was a unified place without borders or boundaries.
Mos Def was released 11 months after being arrested for using the wrong passport.
His agreement with the government was he could only leave using his American passport.
Mos Def was released on November 22nd after making an agreement with the government. In exchange for him using his American passport, the department withdrew charges against him and ruled that he may not return unless the country's Department of Home Affairs grants him a special waiver.
Like a lot of folks who get in trouble in foreign countries, his agreement prevents him from going back to that same country unless he gets approval before he travels there. My advice is very simple. Don't use a world passport.
These high-profile detainments are more than just sensational headlines, but a cautionary tale. Their stories are a stark reminder that fame offers no immunity from the unpredictable and often harsh realities of the world.
Mounting are the cases of celebrities with global fan bases that still manage to find themselves apprehended in a foreign country without any control of their fate. The accusations range in magnitude and consequence, but they are all blanketed with a level of uncertainty. In summer 2015, rapper Freddie Gibbs found himself caught up in a legal nightmare in Vienna, Austria, accused of sexual abuse. The case sent shockwaves through the industry, leaving his fans and the world wondering, how could this happen to one of hip-hop's most promising stars?
If you find yourself in a situation like that, where no one knows your name, they may never know it.
As soon as you get off the plane, you're a meal ticket. It's not the United States.
Freddie Gibbs found himself entangled in Austria's legal system, accused of a crime he vehemently denied.
Rapper Freddie Gibbs is known for his Grammy nominations, Billboard hits, and masterful wordplay. But in Vienna, Austria, he was charged with sexual abuse after a woman accused him of assaulting her in July of 2015. She claimed that Gibbs spiked her and her friend's drink with knockout drops in his hotel.
Gibbs was supposed to perform at the Grell Forel in Vienna, Austria on May 26, 2016, but canceled on short notice. Gibbs was arrested by French authorities in Toulouse.
With sexual assault, these really make it difficult for a defense attorney because they're the kind of things that immediately turn public sentiment against you.
A European arrest warrant was filed by the Viennese prosecution, and Freddie was arrested while he was in France. After 2 weeks in French custody, Gibbs was bailed out of jail for 50,000 euros, approximately 56,000 US dollars. He wasn't permitted to go anywhere, and his passport was confiscated on July 31st, 2016. Gibbs voluntarily withdrew his appeal so he could be extradited to Austria to face trial there instead of France.
Anytime you're out the country and you're not familiar with the laws or the police, you're always going to feel something inside that you're more comfortable when you're back home in the States.
Stories surrounding the incident were amended multiple times by the women, who were 16 and 17 at the time of the accused assault. Although the legal age of consent in Austria is 14, Gibbs was standing up against boundaries of consent, the destruction of his reputation, career, freedom, and future. After spending 4 unpredictable months in French and Austrian jails, the Vienna courts ruled in Freddie's favor. He was acquitted of sexual assault on September 30th, 2016.
Freddie Gibbs was accused of sexual abuse in 2 separate incidents while on tour in Europe.
Despite the acquittal, he actually had to spend 4 months in a French jail on a similar charge before he was able to come back to the States.
It's one thing to be locked up abroad, period. It's another thing when you're in the entertainment industry because these people don't have access to you the way that people in America do.
Most celebrities have teams of lawyers and advisors, and it's important that they reach out to them to find out the do's and don'ts. And, not just the folks who are in your usual circle of advisors, but go outside it and find folks who really know what they're talking about when it comes to the danger of foreign travels for celebrities.
In the spotlight of fame, models, influencers, and actors navigate a challenging path where arrests abroad cast a shadow over their lives. While some leave us questioning their choices, others incite a desire for deeper understanding. These incidents uncover the harsh realities that even the elite must face. In this world, no one is truly untouchable.
Whether it's a rapper, actor, model, athlete, or social media influencer, celebrities not only feel the pressure of being famous, but having their possible detainment and arrest become national headlines that spark a tidal wave of stories around the world.
And influencers in particular are facing a lot of blowback now because there's over-tourism all over Europe and all over most well-traveled places in the world these days.
This is new fame, this is new fortune, this is new money, this is new places, this is new travel.
You can quickly go from the runway to feeling like a runaway when you break tradition in lands unknown.
On July 10th, 2023, Gigi Hadid was arrested and fined in the Cayman Islands for cannabis possession.
Gigi and her friends were detained after arriving to the Caymans in a private jet, and their luggage was searched. It's exceedingly common, but more often than not, it's not a mistake. Folks carry cannabis around the United States and they relax, and cannabis becomes part of what goes in your suitcase.
Gigi's experience underscores the importance of understanding the legal implications of carrying substances, even if they're legal in your home country.
The 28-year-old model and her friend were detained after their luggage was searched as they arrived on a private jet on July 10th, 2023. Although it has been legal for medical use in Grand Cayman since 2017, the Cayman Islands Customs and Border Control arrested Hadid and her friend Leah McCarthy for the importation of marijuana and importation of utensils used for the consumption of marijuana.
They were taken to a detention center and mercifully released on bail.
This incident highlights that even high-profile figures aren't exempt from local laws, no matter where they're from or how famous they may be.
More often than not, you go to a foreign country, you have cannabis in your luggage, you're going to have a problem.
A rep for Gigi stated that marijuana was legally purchased in New York with a medical license. Although not illegal in the U.S., Gigi wasn't aware of the laws in the Cayman Islands.
Although Hadid's representative said the marijuana was purchased legally in New York with a medical license, Gigi and her friend pled guilty in court and paid a fine, but no conviction was recorded.
Whether you break the rules or bend them, you don't get to decide the consequences once you've been arrested.
I feel like when it comes to celebrities and it comes to high-profile people like that, sometimes they tend to think that the laws and the rules don't abide to them.
And in a world where clicks and views are intoxicating, influencers and content creators navigate a hidden reality that few followers ever see. The glamour of luxurious travel, yachts, and fine dining can quickly turn into legal nightmares in foreign lands. One misstep abroad can not only endanger their careers, but also land them in jail. A harsh reminder that fame does not exempt them from the law. From global stages to sports fields, movie sets to social media, the spotlight comes with a price when traveling abroad. In the world of sports, ambition and talent may lead to glory, but no athlete is above the law, especially on foreign ground. Whether faced with stateside restrictions to their overseas success, like Michael Phelps and Sha'Carri Richardson, or international legal reckoning on a global stage, like Brittany Griner, these household names show that even the most celebrated athletes can fall into a web of consequences abroad.
Michael Phelps was suspended from competition on the U.S. team for 3 months due to marijuana use.
We just need to stop taking everything as a joke and understand that these things are taken serious when you leave America, and it's not going to be tolerated.
He was also dropped from his lucrative endorsement deal with Kellogg's, and photos of the 14-time gold medalist circulated throughout the press.
A British tabloid captured 23-year-old Olympian Michael Phelps inhaling from a marijuana pipe at a college party during his off-season. He faced no official sanctions outside of suspension, yet the photo sparked public backlash locally and left Phelps after winning a record 8 gold medals in Beijing, apologizing publicly for his actions.
That photograph was taken at a party 6 months after the 2008 Olympics. His suspension ended in time for the 2009 World Championships.
I don't feel like one thing should have anything to do with the other. As long as he's competing at a high level, it shouldn't matter if he's smoking marijuana or not.
I am happy that I did it for my fans, my loved ones, and the people that don't want to see me do great.
When you travel abroad, every move carries weight. But sometimes it's what you do on home soil that can shatter dreams. Sha'Carri Richardson, a phenomenal runner with an Olympic destiny in her sights, faced a moment in 2021 that cost her the Tokyo Olympic stage due to marijuana use.
It was really unfortunate about Sha'Carri's suspension due to failing the drug test. She was on track to be a world record breaker at the Olympics, and her suspension sparked outrage on social media and calls for the Olympics to change their policy on marijuana.
You know, it must be very difficult for somebody of Sha'Carri Richardson's stature to go through what she went through, because she trained so hard for that moment.
Sha'Carri publicly apologized, revealing she used cannabis to cope with her mother's death. But her choices in the U.S. altered her future abroad and left her unable to perform in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics.
Many people also felt it was unfair, given that U.S. Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps was allowed to compete after being caught for a similar act.
Lots of states now have legalized cannabis in one form or another, and that still hasn't filtered down as far as it needs to.
In 2024, Sha'Carri achieved her dream by competing in the Paris Olympics with the U.S. team. After a hard lesson, she ran for the country that held her accountable. In the sports arena, handcuffs and jail cells are a far cry from the fields, courts, and arenas where athletes thrive. At just 31 years old, Brittney Griner, a rising star in professional basketball, found herself entangled in a nightmare that sent ripple effects through the sports community. Arrested in Russia in February 2022 on charges of drug possession, Griner's situation quickly escalated into a global crisis, pulling her into a highly publicized legal battle that no one saw coming.
WNBA star Brittney Griner's detention in Russia shocked fans and fellow athletes alike.
Griner was taken into custody in Russia in February of 2022 for having cannabis oil in her luggage when she was entering the country to play basketball.
She had been playing over in Russia long before this happened. So I think this was just a situation, of course, of politics, but just the wrong place at the wrong time.
Brittney Griner, the 6'9" Houstonian and center for Phoenix Mercury, was traveling to Russia to play during the WNBA offseason. Unbeknownst to her, the planned visit would morph into an unfathomable incarceration. Brittney was detained at Sheremetyevo International Airport and accused of having vape cartridges containing hashish oil, which is illegal in the country.
Her situation highlights the precarious nature of international travel for high-profile individuals.
Before she was arrested, it wasn't known that the U.S. and Russia had really a destructive relationship that started with the targeting of Viktor Bout.
Viktor Bout, a Russian arms dealer and a former Soviet military officer, was serving a 25-year prison sentence in the U.S. Viktor was sentenced in 2012 after exporting aircraft missiles and supporting a terrorist organization. America had him under lock and key, and Russia wanted him back.
From that moment on, the relationship deteriorated, and Americans no longer faced any modicum of protection if they were traveling to Russia. Now folks know, like the U.S. treats Russian citizens are going to treat U.S. citizens.
It was a ricochet effect. Every move is not only scrutinized, it's also magnified.
Like, it's not a game. Everybody's not playing with you.
Brittany seemingly became a token, being utilized by Russia to send the United States into submission. President Biden had instated a new wave of sanctions and labeled Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal at a press conference. After that, extensions, interruptions, and runarounds galore.
So education is really the only way to deal with this. Once folks are caught up in another country's system and that country does not have good relationships with the United States, it's really difficult to arrange any kind of quick change.
Russia had just entered this war with Ukraine, and relationships with Russia at this time up until now just haven't been great.
You are in these people's hands, you are in these people's country. They're not there to make sure that the legal rights of a person are upheld.
Negotiating a prisoner swap, probably the hardest thing I've ever done, probably the hardest thing any lawyer will ever do.
This is another country where you have no control over what can happen to them.
In March of that same year, 2022, Brittany Griner was seen in a courtroom for the first time since her arrest.
Brittany was at the center of a tug-of-war. Russian attacks escalated against Ukraine, which further soured U.S.-Russia relations. On March 18th, the United States insisted that the Russian government provide consular access to U.S. detainees, and on March 23rd, Brittany met with U.S. officials for the first time since being held in pre-trial detention. April 27th, the demand to bring Brittany home increased after U.S. Marine veteran Trevor Reed was released in a prisoner exchange.
You're going to be prosecuted under the laws of that country, and it's that country's laws that you have to respect.
It's all fun and games until you find yourself trapped abroad.
What has to happen really is the U.S. and Russia have to improve relations and have to learn how to communicate with one another so that each other's citizens are treated with some respect.
The U.S. State Department classified Brittany's case as wrongfully detained on May 3rd. This allowed the U.S. to become more involved in securing her release. The sports community was loud in their support for Brittany. Still, her detention was extended, yet again, on May 13th.
For the most part, that is how detentions work in Russia. They were reviewed approximately every 30 days. The first step is to have a client who the Russians are eager to have returned, repatriated to Russia. That's really the big challenge.
The pressure was on and surged daily. Griner's wife spoke with Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, sharing details of her wife's arrest with the world. She beseeched President Joe Biden to do everything possible to bring Brittany home. On June 8th, before the 2022 finals, NBA superstar Steph Curry asserted to ESPN that Brittany needed to be home, safe, and with her family. But 6 days later, Russian courts extended her pretrial detainment for the third time.
They should have somebody on their team that's allocated to tell them the different laws, the do's and the don'ts, and what they can't do and how serious it is over there.
Failing to bring a client home is every lawyer's worst nightmare. It's the kind of thing that keeps us up at night, every night, and through the night. Griner's detention was extended periodically, and she sent President Joe Biden a letter pleading for her release.
On June 27th, Brittany attended a pretrial hearing to find that her detention was postponed for the fourth time. And now, her trial was set to begin on July 1st. 3 days after her trial began on the 4th of July, President Biden received a personal, handwritten letter from Griner that read, "As I sit here in a Russian prison, alone with my thoughts, and without the protection of my wife, family, friends, Olympic jersey, or any accomplishments, I'm terrified I might be here forever."
Everyone was talking about it or asking us why weren't we talking about it more.
The stakes are impossibly high. People were calling on President Biden to do more to bring her home.
Griner's handwritten note elevated Griner's case to a top priority for the president. On July 7th, Brittany pled guilty on the drug charges. but asserted that the cargo was unintentionally traveled with.
Brittany claimed that she had a prescription for the narcotics and that she was packing quickly and didn't intend to bring them into Russia.
Russia has harsh drug laws with no exceptions for cannabis under any circumstances.
A lot of these countries, they just don't play that, and it was just sad to see her go through that.
You got to understand, you in a different country, you in a different world, and you got to be on point all times, but you also have to realize that the rules are different there.
On July 9th, conversations about Griner's placement in a prisoner swap swarmed headlines. And on August 4th, Griner was found guilty on drug charges and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Her appeal was swiftly filed, but on October 25th, that appeal was rejected after just 30 minutes. After months of negotiations, on December 8th, the U.S. announced that Griner was released in a prisoner exchange with Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. President Biden addressed the press alongside Brittany's wife and thanked everyone involved for working tirelessly to secure her release.
The Biden administration offered lots of people to exchange Brittany Griner with, but the Russians insisted that it could only be Viktor Bout. After spending nearly 10 months in Russian custody, Brittany was released. Well, I think now, in particular, because of the attention that was paid to Brittany Griner's case, folks, I think, are going to be more careful.
She spent 293 days incarcerated in Russia and wrote a book about it and talked about the harsh reality of Russian prisons.
Since her detainment, Griner has turned her pain into power. From opening up about the tumultuous circumstances of her incarceration to standing at the helm of the United States women's Olympic basketball team as a representative of the home that she'd finally come back to.
It really felt good to see Brittany on the court playing for the U.S. Olympic team. She just went over there and, she came back with the gold.
The last thing you want to find yourself in is a jail cell in the destination that you are looking forward to enjoying or working in. Education is elemental in ensuring that you don't find yourself submerged in the startling memories that these celebrities found themselves plowing through.
Being locked up out of the country is always going to be straining your family first because they can't pick up the phone. It's not like being locked up in the United States where you could get on a bus, get on a plane, and go visit.
When you're in a different country, you have no idea the process. And a lot of your fears are only kind of what you see on TV or, maybe in a movie or something.
There's nothing that you can really do because you can't prepare yourself for that.
You make a mistake in a foreign courtroom, you make one mistake, and your client could end up never coming home.
I feel like we need to be more educated on that country that we're going to.
There are so many people whose names we've never heard still sitting in jail in another country, just waiting for some good news.
A lot of these other countries have different religions that take things serious, different constitutional rights. So there's so many different things that play a part in when you're going over to step into that other country.
You just don't know how things work there. Protocols, etc. You could easily make the mistake and insult somebody.
Once it happens, it's a feeling like you never, ever felt. There's no way for me to communicate with my son. You can't reach out to them. You can't speak to them. They can't speak to you. They can't tell you if they're in pain. They can't tell you if they're hurting. So it's really nothing that you could prepare yourself.
Whether your name is in lights, on sports jerseys, flooding social media, or filling movie credits, international travel requires more than just fame. It demands vigilance. These celebrities encountered foreign lands in ways they never expected, often turning dream destinations into nightmares. No matter their accolades, each of these cautionary tales serves as a harsh reminder of the unpredictable perils of travel. Anyone, regardless of fame or fortune, can find themselves arrested abroad. To grow up in North Philly, survive the streets, and gain respect as a rapper, you need more than tough skin. You need Kevlar, raw talent, and a dream. Success is one of the few ways to make the cost of that armor worth the reward.
You could survive in North Philly, but it made you a certain kind of person.
For Philly rap legend Meek Mill, determination set his path toward a dream he refused to wake up from, despite the nightmares along the way.
Meek Mill is more than a rapper. He's a movement.
He's a living legend in the hip-hop community and in Philly.
In 2007, Meek's Philly fairy tale took a dark turn and ignited an antagonistic origin story that would change his life forever.
Meek is living proof of the old adage that you only make diamonds when you apply pressure.
We're seeing those hidden dark aspects of the court system that a lot of people didn't know before this case was even announced.
A political movement born from the ashes of a fiery battle between a rapper with dreams of fame and fortune and a judge determined to stand in his way.
Judge Brinkley cracked down, determined to keep him all the way in jail.
This is the journey of Meek Mill, a journey through the shadows of injustice and the quest for redemption.
The late 80s and 90s in the city of brotherly love was all about the come-up. Celebrities like Will Smith and DJ Jazzy Jeff were making a name for themselves and putting Philly on the map. As the city showed its jewels by way of talent and opportunity, North Philly was still a diamond in the rough.
I grew up in North Philadelphia. My neighborhood, like every part of North Philadelphia, was filled with lots of things. There was love and there was community, there was joy, but there was also a lot of violence. There was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of drug addiction. There were crumbling schools.
And during that tough time, one of the biggest rappers of the 21st century would be born in that tough place.
Robert Rameek Williams was born in Philadelphia in 1987. His mom, her name was Kathy Williams. Meek Mill's father, Robert Parker, was killed in 1992 attempting a robbery, and Meek was only 5 years old.
With his father gone, Meek would learn difficult lessons while finding his way as a brother, a son, and the man of the house. He frequently recalls this shift in his life, vocalizing that at a very early age, he developed a sense of responsibility and the urgency to conquer the obstacles facing his mother, his older sister, Nashima, and himself.
Because he lost his father, much of the upbringing, much of the community, much of the protection that he received came from his neighborhood. It came from brothers on the corner. It came from old heads up the block. It came from people who may have wanted him to be okay, but also were engaged in some activities that were a bad influence on him.
5 years old is a really, really early age to activate your survival mode.
Meek Mill grew up surrounded by hard times and hard consequences, a hood teetering with crime and cops.
Being from North Philly, Meek Mill knew what it meant to grow up around poverty. He knew what it meant to grow up in households that didn't have fathers. He understood what it meant to have to be a survivor from day one.
At this time, North Philly was becoming a center for drugs, violence, robbery, and homicide. For Meek, it may have been difficult to be a child trying to do the right thing.
Despite the hardships of growing up in the projects, Robert Rameek Williams had a passion that kept him focused on a future beyond the world around him: rap.
Coming up in North Philly, everybody wanted to be a rapper. So you spend a lot of time having lunchroom battle raps. You spend a lot of time on the block sharpening your skills.
Some people didn't even know that Meek was a battle rapper. I mean, that's how he started. In Philly, guys would just be on the block and then you would just spit without no beat and just go against one another. And it's real loud, spit going flying everywhere, people standing right around you. That's the purest form of hip hop, is when it's mano y mano, it's me against you. And you know, Meek did it really well.
You see that artistry and you see that talent and you see that tenacity in Meek Mill's raps.
Even the most promising and talented individuals could find themselves influenced by the mischief of the Philadelphia streets. The smorgasbord of temptation left something for everyone, and trouble wasn't hard to find.
Meek was a quiet and focused kid and was friends with drug dealers growing up, and he lost a lot of friends to the streets.
At 14 years old, Robert Williams knew he had what it took to throw down with the best of the best.
He started making a lot of noise doing collabs with people. He started making a name for himself real young in hip-hop.
Meek joined a group called the Bloodhounds in 2001, which was one of the hottest up-and-coming rap groups in the city.
Meek wanted it bad. His hustle, his work ethic. You know, he watched his mom. He watched his mom be in the hustle, and that's what motivated him. That's what gave him the drive, and, you know, he hasn't stopped since.
Success found Meek Mill, whose years of hustling finally paid off in the following years. Eventually, Meek Mill would go on to become one of the biggest rappers in the world, winning awards, topping charts, and garnering fame and notoriety.
Meek Mill rose from battle rapping on local streets to a hometown hero, pouring cash into the city's schools and bailing out 20 women for the holidays.
Riding the high of charity in 2017, he released his third studio album, Wins and Losses.
On August 16, 2017, Meek Mill is on The Tonight Show, a big moment for anybody's career.
But little did Meek Mill know that after his performance promoting Wins and Losses, he would quickly go from the win of a televised performance to an immediate and dramatic loss.
He's in Upper Manhattan, and there's a videotape that emerges of him popping a wheelie on a dirt bike.
The amount of police presence for arresting Meek Mill after popping a wheelie appeared to be very excessive and unusual.
When I heard about the arrest when he violated his probation for popping the wheelie, that just blew me away. I mean, I've been a victim of bullshit arrests. I've been a victim of petty arrests by police. That has to be one of the most pettiest. Popping a wheelie, I ride bikes, and I've popped many wheelies. And I've been arrested for a few things, but I've never, ever been arrested for that.
Meek's rapid success was in danger, all from mischief in the streets on a four-wheeler. Jail time was facing the rap battle legend, and with 2 to 4 years hanging over his head, Meek, along with the rest of the media, beg an answer to one singular question. What is going on here? But will he receive an answer, or just the icy chill of handcuffs? After a lifetime of grinding, committing his craft and fighting his way into the spotlight, Meek Mill is on top of the world. That is, until a seemingly inconsequential arrest uncovers a decade of legal woes. From rap battles to court battles, Meek's fight appeared to be far from over. A rising young star, only 30 years old, finds himself sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison following an arrest for popping a wheelie. The media erupts into a confused frenzy. A superstar rapper facing hard time for doing a trick on a dirt bike?
Meek went from promoting his album on late night TV to immediately facing 2 to 4 years in prison for felony charges and probation violations.
When Meek Mill walked into that Philadelphia courtroom in 2017, Judge Janice Brinkley made headlines by sending him back to prison for popping illegal wheelies while on probation.
On that day, Meek Mill got in more trouble for a dirt bike than maybe anybody in American history.
But to trace the line from popping a wheelie to 4 years in prison, you must first follow the thread all the way back to the very beginning.
His legal saga began in 2007 with a dramatic arrest on drug and weapon charges during an alleged undercover deal in Southwest Philly.
Growing up in North Philly, where Meek Mill grew up, it's definitely not difficult to find yourself in a negative encounter with a law enforcement officer.
But when Meek opened the door to leave his cousin's apartment in January 2007, he was met with more than just the Philly streets on the other side.
So in January of 2007, Meek Mill is walking down the street, going to the corner store, he says. At this point, the police arrest him.
Reportedly, he was beaten and arrested by an entire entourage of police officers.
I mean, it was police brutality, plain and simple. He was a teenager, he was bloody, black eye. He even had some of his braids ripped out.
And Meek says that they use his head as a battering ram to open a door.
Once inside, police searched for evidence, throwing the apartment and Meek's life into chaos.
They were looking for evidence to tie him to a crime that they allegedly witnessed, and they didn't care what they had to do to make them right.
The evidence was recovered. The suspects were arrested, but the question remained, what was the crime?
Officer Reggie Graham was one of the primary officers and the key and only witness ever brought to court against Meek Mill.
On January 23, 2007, Philadelphia Field Narcotics Police Officer Reggie Graham says that he saw Meek Mill sell crack to a confidential informant. The next day, Meek is arrested and brought in on drug charges.
Cracking down on drug activity was a constant priority. So, when an officer insists your involvement, it's taken seriously. Innocent until proven guilty becomes a blurred line. And for Meek's encounter, this was more than a suspected drug arrest.
Reggie Graham had said that when they went to make an arrest, that Meek Mill had ran from him, and while they was chasing him, Meek had actually pulled out a gun and started threatening him.
Now, according to Meek, he'd already ditched the gun and he wasn't carrying a gun when he was apprehended.
Under these circumstances, he didn't stand a chance.
Following his arrest by over 20 police officers, Meek Mill was put on trial in front of Judge Janice Brinkley.
On August 19, 2008, Meek Mill for the first time enters Judge Janice Brinkley's courtroom. And he's facing drug charges and gun charges.
The judge in this case had already had a bad reputation in the Philly court system. She was known for being cold, calculated, and unreasonable.
Judge Janice Brinkley was most known for her relentless pursuit of probation violations in her cases.
The trial began and Meek found himself up against the entire system, standing on his own.
In court, Officer Graham took the stand and told the judge that he witnessed the alleged drug deals firsthand from his cruiser, and he saw Meek Mill run from the police and point a gun at them. Typically, if an officer takes a stand and says that a gun was pointed at him or her by a defendant, that is going to definitely hold weight.
Graham's testimony would end up being the killing blow for the case against Meek Mill.
Now, in most cases, a weapons charge like Meek's would result in house arrest and a fine. But on this day, in Judge Brinkley's courtroom, he received a 22-month sentence in the county jail and 8 years of probation.
Meek was found guilty on 7 of the 19 charges brought against him. 4 of those charges pertain to possession of a firearm and aiming at an officer.
What was quite interesting about the Meek Mill situation was that the sentence was less than the time he was on probation, which caused into serious question whether or not this judge was actually following the law.
Meek Mill's musical prowess earned his status as one of hip-hop's elite.
Meek was sent to the big house to carry out the sentence on a crime he claims he didn't commit.
Now, at the same time that Meek is in the middle of legal woes, his music career is starting to take off. Just a few days after that sentence, Flamers comes out, and it's the hottest mixtape on the streets.
Meek's career took off at a sprint, and in 2012, he took the world outside of Philly by storm with the release of his debut album, Dreams and Nightmares.
Dreams and Nightmares. Oh my God, I remember that. That's my guy.
However, the celebration period for Dreams and Nightmares was short-lived. The day after the album's release, Meek's festivities turned quickly from a dream into an all-too-familiar nightmare.
The day after Meek Mill's album drops, October 31st, he's in legal trouble again.
Police executed a routine pullover because of Meek Mill's dark window tint. Police asked to search his car for suspected marijuana, but Meek refused to let them do so.
And all it took was one small violation, a shade of window tint, a smidge too dark, to rope Meek Mill back into the endless, vicious grip of the legal system and of Janice Brinkley.
Now, because of the legal issue with the tinted windows and the weed in the car, he has a probation violation. So now Meek Mill has to go back to Judge Brinkley's courtroom.
Judge Brinkley charged Meek with violating his probation and ordered 2 drug tests. Both came back clean. She still decided to restrict his travel.
But seeing his career threatened, Meek tries desperately to keep the momentum of his debut going.
What do you do if you're a rapper who has an album out, who can't travel to do shows when that's the primary way you make money? Well, you either stay in your city and lose all your money, or you risk probation violations by traveling.
When Judge Brinkley found out that Meek had booked concerts, she was livid. She put Meek on house arrest to the end of the year, knowing how much that would set him back.
And this is where I believe the back and forth between him and the judge really began. That game will go on for a long, long time.
What started as a simple arrest for a run-of-the-mill suspected drug deal turns into a lifelong feud between a young rapper trying to get his shot at fame and a judge who's in a white-hot pursuit of justice. But when the two forces collide, who will prevail against a system built to suppress? Can one singular man even stand a chance?
It looks to many people like they're simply trying to humiliate and shame Meek in public.
Not one to take no for an answer, Meek continues to put 100% into the grind, working at his craft and trying to perform for his fans, trying being the key word.
The one consistent thing was his traveling privileges were being revoked by Brinkley because he wasn't reporting back to the court.
July 13th, 2014, Meek Mill performs a concert out of the city. The judge finds out and orders him to spend time in jail for probation violations.
Every time Meek seemed poised for greatness, the judge held him back, hindering his path to stardom.
With every step forward in his career, Meek found himself hand in hand with the courts, his consequences growing larger and larger as the length of his probation stretched across years.
In February 2016, Meek Mill attended a 4.5-hour hearing where he made a passionate testimonial, arguing for leniency and grace from the courts. There were hours of pleas on Meek's behalf, but the judge was unmoved.
He'd be forced to wear an ankle monitor, participate in community service, and was prohibited from working and traveling outside of Philly.
Despite being court-ordered to either be at home or at the homeless shelter for his community service, Meek still finds himself fighting to overcome the hurdle of Judge Brinkley's impossible standards.
The judge accused Meek Mill of not fulfilling his community service, even though Meek Mill had been at the shelter doing his community work.
According to Brinkley, she made a surprise visit to the homeless shelter that Meek was ordered to do his community service. When she got there, she sat at a table to blend in and observe. And she was astounded by what she saw.
He was helping bagging up clothing donations for the homeless, but Judge Brinkley wanted him to serve food, so because of that, she held him in violation. I mean, it was low-key harassment.
Now, all of a sudden, we're asking why she's showing up to community service.
Judge Brinkley's appearing at community service is odd. It appears that there was an overstepping of judicial authority.
In early 2017, a decade after his probation began, Meek finds himself in the headlines yet again. But this time, it's at the center of an airport brawl.
Meek Mill sparks chaos in my hometown, St. Louis, at the airport in 2017 after a scuffle erupts when he refuses a fan's photo request, leading to a misdemeanor assault charge while still on probation.
Once again, Judge Brinkley held him in violation.
In November 2017, we end up right back where we began, New York City, where Meek Mill is arrested after a video of him popping a wheelie on a dirt bike is posted on social media.
Despite continuous legal woes, Meek drops his album, Wins and Losses, in 2017 and hits the Tonight Show stage, but gets nabbed for reckless motorbike driving antics in New York, igniting a fresh legal battle captured on social media.
Because of the arrest for the dirt bike, Judge Brinkley once again said, Meek, you can't travel because you have another probation violation.
The assistant DA and Meek's own probation officer advocated on Meek's behalf.
Judge Brinkley delivers her ruling on Meek over his driving stunt. But little does she know, there's a storm brewing over the Pennsylvania courthouse, and the clouds are preparing to part.
Judge Brinkley delivers a crushing blow, sentencing Meek to 2 to 4 years in state prison for violating probation.
The verdict felt incredibly harsh to the public, especially when considering that all sides were pushing against jail time for this violation.
The fact that Meek Mill suffered so many probation violations was a concern for the judge. However, The question becomes who actually violated him. It doesn't make any sense that he suffered all of these violations and it continued over the amount of time that it did.
With Meek potentially heading to prison and the public now pulling their magnifying glasses onto the entire court, has Judge Janice Brinkley finally flown too close to the sun? But will she actually get burned? Or will she just watch as Meek Mill goes up in flames? With Meek Mill in handcuffs, Judge Janice Brinkley watches with a gavel production. But with the world now looking in on her courtroom, will she be able to keep her hold on Meek's future like she has for the last 10 years? Or will she be exposed as a judge holding a petty grudge?
There's an immediate rallying around Meek after his sentencing is announced from fans and colleagues alike.
I believe this was the start of an entire social justice movement.
For the first time, people who never paid attention to the injustices of our probation system were now paying attention. And that would not change. In fact, it has started an unrelenting, uncompromising movement to reform probation and parole around the country.
Mobilized by famous friends and supporters of Meek, a revolution begins.
What's important to understand is that this system is actually controlled and run by its citizens, the general public. And once the general public loses confidence in the system, there's going to be a movement for social change.
Since I was a teenager, I've been fighting for change in the criminal justice system. But I became especially interested in the case of Meek because I knew him. We're from the same neighborhood, we're from the same city, and I was inspired by his talent and his genius.
As Meek is hauled off to prison, his fellow rappers, including Jay-Z, Rick Ross, they all rallied behind him, offering words of encouragement, marking the beginning of a high-profile battle for justice.
Billboards and buses sprung up seemingly overnight, calling to free Meek Mill and demanding justice.
On November 14, 2017, hashtag Free Meek Mill buses swarmed Philly's police headquarters, followed by a massive protest involving celebrity backing and support from stars like Julius, Dr. J. Irving, rapper Rick Ross, as billboards demanding Meek's release spring up all across the city.
He had the support of big names and the culture was behind him. People knew who he was, so it was like all hands on deck.
In the public's eye, the demand to free Meek Mill became synonymous with the idea of reforming the justice system.
Even from the inside, Meek feels the support being given to him and is inspired toward change.
Through the course of his legal struggles, Meek Mill isn't just a victim of the system. He becomes a passionate and prominent voice of potential reform of that very system.
Despite incarceration, Meek joins a criminal justice reform panel on March 13th, declaring himself a voice for the voiceless and amplifying the call for change.
The public is in full support of a free Meek Mill and reformed prison and probation systems. But the major problem, Meek is still in prison. Enter private investigating firm QRI.
QRI is a private investigation firm founded by Luke, Brendel Kim, and Tyler Marani. QRI was brought in to help overturn Meek's conviction and get him out of prison.
The law is set up where wrongs that have been done are always open to be overturned. The question is, who can do it and how do they do it? It starts off by finding new evidence.
To do that, they had to start at the very beginning, Meek's 2007 arrest.
Luke and Tyler started at the very beginning with the thing that started it all, the alleged drug deal that Officer Reggie Graham said he saw Meek perpetrate.
According to the original police report, Reggie Graham was parked in his police cruiser. That's when he saw a 19-year-old Meek Mill walk to a street corner and engage in drug activity. So Tyler and Luke parked their car exactly where the cruiser was in their report. And they realized something. It was impossible to see the apartment in the corner from that position.
Given the evidence presented, the defense claimed there was no way Reggie Graham could have seen Meek Mills exit the apartment, engage in the drug deal, and then walked back home, like his official testimony states.
And then the investigation turns to the other officers that accompanied Graham on the day Meek was arrested.
There were 19 officers listed on the original documents as witnesses and participants in the arrest of Meek Mill. But Luke and Tyler discovered that there were more officers there. Why would they leave any of the arresting officer off the police reports?
Meek's team tracked down one of the alleged missing officers who claimed Meek didn't in fact resist arrest or pull out a gun. Other officers corroborated this story as well.
It's a question of, can we trust police officers? Can we trust judges? I mean, are we really to believe that Meek Mill pulled a gun out as a black man in North Philadelphia on police officers and somehow didn't get shot and was arrested without incident? That seems almost impossible.
With the evidence piling up against Reggie Graham, the boys from QRI were beginning to prepare their cases when a final, crucial piece of evidence went public.
Reggie Graham was listed in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Do Not Call list, including current and former police officers barred from testifying due to misconduct.
Underneath his name, the list stated that Graham was being investigated by federal authorities for several acts of corruption and had retired before his scheduled hearing. Strike number 3.
Reggie Graham had fallen into an investigation for misconduct and hastily retired before his hearing, leaving an opening for QRI to blow the case against Meek Mill wide open.
This meant that the prosecution's one and only witness had proven to be unreliable. The moment that the court senses, sees, or is given information that the credibility of a police officer or court officer has been damaged, then there is no going back.
All of it looks suspicious. And the fact that it looks suspicious in Meek's case makes America, and anyone watching this in particular, realize that it ain't just about Meek. That every single person who goes into that courtroom is subjected to the possibility of bias, the possibility of inequality, the possibility that they won't get a fair shake.
Armed with the evidence from the QRI investigation, Meek Mill's legal team presents the findings to the Philadelphia Court of Appeals, hoping to gain freedom for Meek.
Meek releases his pinnacle single and anthem of defiance, Dreams and Nightmares, in February 2018. The rap song becomes a rallying cry for justice as it echoes through the Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl victory, symbolizing resilience in the face of injustice.
Like black people have done throughout history, Meek Mill transformed his pain into power. Although he took many losses with the criminal justice system, he managed to catapult himself into a leadership role in the reform movement.
With the evidence and the public rallied behind him, Meek Mill waits on bated breath as his future is decided within the Court of Appeals. But is a binder of evidence and a trending social justice movement enough to overpower a system of corruption that's been running unchecked for the last decade? While the public was protesting and petitioning for Meek's freedom, a team of private investigators were preparing evidence. Meek Mill sits in a jail cell, waiting for the Philadelphia court system to decide his fate. And then they do.
After months of legal battles, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court orders Meek Mill's early release from prison, overturning his controversial 2 to 4 year sentence for probation violation.
I think a high-profile case like Meek Mill's case keeps law enforcement and the criminal justice system on their toes. They know that all eyes are on them, so they have to make sure that investigation is done right.
Meek's life is a story of racial injustice, economic inequality, corrupt systems. But like many people who face those systems, he pushed back, he resisted, he struggled, and he ultimately emerged victorious.
With protests and demonstrations filling the streets and surrounding courthouses, billboards lining the roads, and celebrities leading the charge, the hashtag Free Meek Mill movement captured the nation's attention.
Throughout the trial, a sea of voices echoed throughout the streets of Philly as hundreds rallied behind Meek Mill. They all was chanting, "Free Meek Mill," and demanding an end to systemic injustice. Each protest significantly helped steer Meek in the direction of freedom.
After 10 years of being pulled in and out of house arrests, hearings, prisons, people were finally listening. Meek's story finally made the people realize the problems that have been plaguing our probation system for years.
He has turned himself into a leader, not just for his city, but for the entire country, advocating for an entire overhaul of a broken system.
For a decade, it was Meek Mill versus the entire justice system. And in the blink of an eye, the tides of the battle turned, and Meek found himself surrounded by support.
The previous Pennsylvania governor, Tom Wolf, pardoned Meek of his original arrest, freeing him completely.
In December 2023, the new Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro, signed reforms to Pennsylvania's probation system, limiting when a person serving probation can be sent off to prison for technical violations.
When Governor Josh Shapiro introduces a major probation reform bill in the state of Pennsylvania, who's standing next to him? Meek Mill. And Meek wasn't just a bystander in that conversation. He spoke at the podium. He talked about his experience, and he talked about the fight to get this bill passed. That day, that moment is proof that we can change society and that people can change their lives.
Meek's case was overturned because of public awareness, because of public advocacy, and because of the public sentiment that this was a wrong and a miscarriage of justice.
Meek Mill's activism is centered around prison and probation reform, working hard to prevent other people from being preyed upon in the same way he was.
Meek Mill co-founded the Reform Alliance alongside Jay-Z and the New England Patriots owner, Robert Kraft.
Meek is a trailblazer in criminal justice reform, penning a New York Times op-ed and co-founding the Reform Alliance, aiming to change laws and free 1 million people.
With his own legal battles behind him, Meek is able to put his focus back behind his real passion, his music.
In November 2018, Meek Mill put out his 4th studio album, Championships. It was met with critical and commercial acclaim.
Despite legal battles, Meek Mill's musical prowess earned him a Grammy nomination in 2020, solidifying his status as one of hip-hop's elite with an estimated net worth of $20 million.
You know, Meek is a young guy from Philly who has a gift of words and lyrics. People just was happy to see him doing what God put him on this earth to do.
By the time the 2020s rolled around, it really did seem like Meek Mill was getting the last laugh.
As of 2023, Judge Brinkley, under fire for her handling of Mill's case, is reassigned amid disputes over criminal justice reform, facing allegations of discrimination and retaliation as her re-election looms.
After Meek Mill's case, the judicial leadership started looking into several of Judge Janice Brinkley's cases. They found a paper trail of seemingly illegal sentences.
After a failed re-election bid, Judge Janice Brinkley found herself cast out of her own courtroom, all at the hands of the public that rallied behind Meek Mill and against her.
Brinkley stirs debate, with her lawyer likening her situation to having her hands tied behind her back and duct tape on her mouth.
People saw that a judge went well beyond the authority and decency of fair and impartiality of this particular individual. And when they saw it, with the help of many people, they rose up, and it did change our system in Philadelphia and perhaps beyond.
Meek kept receiving backlash from the court system. When Meek scheduled new concerts against her orders, she placed him on a 90-day house arrest, effectively halting his career momentum.
Meek Mill has been extraordinarily successful despite all of his legal challenges. But the fact remains, he is still hampered by his past. He still is limited by his felony convictions. He still has had losses financially and reputationally that he can never recover from.
Finally, Meek's battle with Judge Brinkley was over, and Meek Mill didn't hesitate to make up for lost time. With all the support he received through his battle, he grew dedicated to paying it forward and invoking change. Nothing could be taken for granted, and the sky was the limit for Meek, his music, and his